Jake Morrison was flying his cargo ship through the outer rim when the distress signal came through his radio. The beeping sound cut through the quiet hum of his engines and made him sit up straight in his pilot's seat. He had been hauling supplies between planets for 6 years now, and distress calls were not something he heard very often. The signal was coming from Keth 7, a desert moon that most pilots avoided because of its harsh conditions. Jake looked at his navigation screen and saw that the signal was coming from deep inside the burning flats, the most dangerous part of the entire moon. The temperature there could reach over 140 degrees during the day and drop below freezing at night. Sandstorms were common and they could strip the skin right off. Jake stared at the blinking red dot on his screen that showed where the distress signal was coming from. It was 90 miles into the desert from the nearest safe landing spot. Most cargo pilots would have logged the signal with the authorities and kept flying. Rescue missions in the burning flats had almost no chance of success, and everyone knew it, but Jake could not bring himself to ignore the signal. 3 years ago, his younger brother Danny had died in a ship crash on a remote asteroid. Danny had sent out a distress call too, but no one had come to help him. No one had even tried. The rescue teams said it was too dangerous and too far away. Jake had received Danny's last message 2 weeks after his brother died, and it still haunted him every night. The message had been simple. "Jake, if you get this, tell Mom I love her. I think I'm going to die out here, but I keep hoping someone will come. Please don't let them forget about me." Jake had promised himself that day that he would never leave someone to die alone if he could help it. He looked at the distress signal again and made his choice. He turned his ship toward Keth 7. The landing was rough because the desert moon's surface was covered in sharp rocks and deep sand. Jake brought his ship down at the edge of the burning flats, where the ground was still solid enough to support the weight. He could see the heat waves rising from the desert in front of him. Even though it was still early morning, Jake went to his emergency locker and started packing supplies. He took every bottle of water he could carry, 4 cooling packs that would help keep his body temperature down, some basic medical supplies, and a small portable shelter. He also grabbed his father's old rifle, not because he expected trouble, but because his father had always told him to be prepared for anything. The walk into the desert was hard from the very beginning. The sand was soft and deep, which made each step difficult. The sun was getting higher, and the temperature was rising fast. Jake had to stop every few minutes to drink water and check his direction on his handheld navigation device. After 4 hours of walking, Jake could see smoke rising in the distance. That had to be the crashed ship. He picked up his pace even though his legs were already tired and his shirt was soaked with sweat. The cooling packs were helping, but he knew they would not last much longer in this heat when Jake finally reached the crash site. He was shocked by what he found. The ship was not some small cargo vessel like he had expected. It was a large diplomatic cruiser with elegant curves and beautiful metallic paint that was now blackened and twisted from the crash. The symbols on the side were in a language Jake did not recognize, but they looked important. Jake walked around the wreckage looking for survivors. He found several bodies near the ship and could tell they were not human. They were taller than humans with blue-silver skin and long white hair. Their clothes were fancy and looked like they might be uniforms or ceremonial dress. Then Jake heard a soft moaning sound coming from under a piece of debris. He ran over and carefully moved the metal aside. Underneath was another alien, but this one was still alive. It was a female, and she was badly hurt. Her left leg was twisted at a wrong angle, and there was blood on her forehead. Her breathing was shallow, and her skin was pale. Jake could tell she was someone important by her clothes. She wore a long white robe with silver threads that caught the light even though it was torn and dirty. Around her neck was a chain with a large blue stone that seemed to glow softly. The other aliens he had found were wearing simpler clothes, and their bodies were positioned as if they had been trying to protect her when the ship crashed. The injured alien opened her eyes and looked at Jake. Her eyes were large and violet-colored, unlike anything Jake had ever seen. She tried to say something, but the words came out as weak whispers in a language Jake could not understand. But he could see the pain and fear in her expression. Jake knelt down beside her and spoke in a calm voice. "Hey there, I'm here to help. I know you can't understand me, but I'm going to get you out of here." The alien woman looked at him with surprise. She seemed shocked that a stranger would come to help her. Jake carefully examined her injuries. Her leg was definitely broken, and she was dehydrated from lying in the desert heat. Without medical help, she would die within hours. Jake looked around, at the crashed ship and then back toward the way he had come. His own ship was 90 miles away through some of the most dangerous terrain in the galaxy. The temperature was already over 120 degrees, and it would get hotter. The alien woman was too badly hurt to walk and too big for Jake to carry easily, but Jake remembered his brother Danny and the promise he had made to himself. He would not leave anyone to die alone if he could prevent it. He started gathering materials to make a stretcher. Using pieces of metal from the crashed ship and some fabric from the emergency supplies, Jake built a simple stretcher that could be dragged across the sand. He used his cooling packs to make a pillow for the alien woman's head and gave her small sips of water from his bottle. The alien woman watched him work with growing amazement. She seemed to understand that this human stranger was risking his own life to save hers. When Jake finished the stretcher and carefully moved her onto it, she reached out with a weak hand and touched his arm. She said something in her own language. That sounded like a thank you. Jake checked his supplies one more time. He had enough water for maybe 3 days if he was careful. The journey back to his ship would take at least 4 days while pulling the stretcher. The math was not good, but Jake had made his choice. He looked down at the alien woman who was watching him with those strange violet eyes. "Okay, lady, we're going home. This is going to be rough, but we're going to make it." Jake picked up the stretcher, handles, and started walking back toward his ship. The sun was directly overhead now, and the heat was becoming unbearable. But Jake kept walking, one step at a time, into the burning desert that had killed so many others before them. The first day was the hardest thing Jake had ever done in his life. Pulling the stretcher through the soft sand while the temperature climbed toward 140 degrees tested every muscle in his body. The alien woman drifted in and out of consciousness. But when she was awake, she watched Jake with those violet eyes that seemed full of wonder. Jake had to stop every hour to rest and give them both water. He was already sweating heavily, and he knew he was losing water faster than he should. But the alien woman needed water too, and Jake refused to let her suffer while he had supplies to share. During the hottest part of the day, Jake set up his small emergency shelter, and they waited for the sun to move lower in the sky. The shelter was barely big enough for both of them, and Jake had to lie very close to the alien woman to fit them both in the shade. He could feel how hot her skin was from the fever that was setting in from her injuries. When the alien woman was conscious, she tried to talk to him. She would point to herself and say what Jake thought might be her name. It sounded like Lyrelay, but he was not sure. Jake pointed to himself and said Jake several times until she seemed to understand. She repeated his name with her strange accent, and it made him smile despite their terrible situation. As the sun started to set, Jake packed up the shelter and started walking again. The temperature dropped quickly once the sun went down, but that brought new problems. The desert became freezing cold at night, and the alien woman started shivering uncontrollably. Jake stopped and took off his jacket to cover her, but she was still shaking. Jake realized she might die from the cold just as easily as from the heat. He made a decision that he knew was risky. He lay down next to her on the stretcher and pulled his jacket over both of them. He used his body heat to keep her warm through the long, cold night. The alien woman seemed surprised by this, but she stopped shivering. Jake could feel her breathing become more steady and peaceful. Sometimes she would mumble things in her language that sounded like she might be talking in her sleep. The second day was worse than the first. Jake's water supply was running low, and his body was starting to feel the effects of dehydration. His lips were cracked and his head was pounding, but he kept walking. The alien woman was getting weaker, and she spent most of the day unconscious. Around midday, a sandstorm hit them without warning. The wind picked up suddenly, and sand started flying through the air so thick that Jake could barely see his own hands. He quickly set up the shelter again, but the sand was getting inside anyway. Jake covered the alien woman with his jacket and used his own body to shield her from the worst of the storm. He could feel the sand hitting his back like tiny needles, but he did not move. The storm lasted for 3 hours, and when it finally passed, Jake's back was raw and bleeding from the sand, but the alien woman was safe. When she woke up and saw Jake's injuries, she tried to sit up with alarm. She touched his wounded back gently and said something that sounded like an apology. Jake just smiled and shook his head to let her know it was okay. The third day, Jake started hallucinating from dehydration and exhaustion. Sometimes he thought he saw his brother Danny walking beside him in the desert. Other times he imagined he was back home on Earth sitting by a cool river. But every time his mind started to wander, he would look down at the alien woman and remember why he was there. The alien woman was conscious more often now, and she seemed to be getting stronger instead of weaker. Jake thought maybe her people healed faster than humans, or maybe she was just tougher than she looked. She started trying to help by using her hands to push against the ground when Jake was pulling the stretcher on the third night. When Jake lay down beside her to share warmth, she did something that surprised him. She put her arm around him and held him close. When Jake looked at her, she was staring at him with an expression he had never seen before. It was like she was trying to memorize his face. The fourth day, Jake was barely able to stand up. He had been giving most of his water to the alien woman, and his body was shutting down from dehydration. His vision was blurry and his hands were shaking, but he refused to stop walking. The alien woman could see how bad Jake was getting. She tried to give him back some of the water, but Jake pushed it away. She needed it more than he did, and he was determined to get her to safety even if it killed him. That night, Jake collapsed before he could set up the shelter. He fell face first into the sand and could not find the strength to get back up. The alien woman managed to crawl off the stretcher despite her broken leg, and she pulled Jake into the shade of a large rock. She used her torn robe to wipe the sand from Jake's face and gave him water from his own bottle. She stayed awake all night watching over him while he slept fitfully in the sand. The fifth day, Jake woke up to find the alien woman sitting beside him looking worried. She helped him stand up and they started walking again, but Jake was stumbling more than walking. The alien woman tried to walk on her broken leg to help, but Jake would not let her hurt herself more. Around noon, Jake saw something in the distance that made his heart jump. It was his ship, still sitting where he had left it at the edge of the desert. But it was still 2 miles away, and Jake did not know if he had enough strength left to make it. Jake pushed himself harder than he ever had before. Step by step, he dragged the stretcher across the burning sand toward his ship. The alien woman was talking to him constantly now in her own language, and even though Jake could not understand the words, he could hear the encouragement in her voice. With his ship only half a mile away, Jake's body finally gave out. He collapsed in the sand and could not get back up no matter how hard he tried. His vision went dark, and he thought he was going to die right there in sight of safety. The alien woman managed to drag herself off the stretcher and crawl to where Jake lay unconscious. She pulled something small from her robes that Jake had not seen before. It looked like a tiny metal device, and when she pressed it, the device started blinking and making soft sounds. Within minutes, Jake heard the sound of engines overhead. He opened his eyes to see several large ships landing near them. Aliens in silver uniforms jumped out and ran toward them carrying medical equipment. The last thing Jake remembered before losing consciousness was the alien woman holding his hand and saying his name over and over again. But now, when she said Jake, it sounded different. Like it meant something more than just a name. Jake had walked 90 miles through hell to save a stranger, and somehow they had both survived. But as the alien medical team worked to save his life, Jake had no idea that his act of simple human kindness was about to change the entire galaxy forever. The alien woman watched the medical team work on Jake with tears in her violet eyes. In her language, she whispered words that would have shocked Jake if he could have understood them. She was not just thanking him for saving her life. She was claiming him as her future husband, according to the ancient laws of her people, Queen. Lyra Lay of the Zalathian Empire had found the man she wanted to marry, and according to her people's traditions, he had already proven himself worthy by carrying her through mortal danger for 5 days. Now she just had to convince him to accept the honor she was about to offer him. Jake woke up 3 weeks later in the most comfortable bed he had ever felt in his life. The room around him was huge and made of some kind of white stone that seemed to glow softly. Large windows showed stars and planets that Jake did not recognize. He was clearly not on his own ship anymore. A gentle voice spoke from beside his bed, and Jake turned to see the alien woman he had rescued. But she looked completely different now. Her blue-silver skin was healthy and glowing, her white hair was arranged in an elaborate style with jewels woven through it, and she wore a flowing dress that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. "Hello, Jake," she said in perfect English, which shocked him since she had not spoken his language before. "I am Queen Lyra Lay of the Zalathian Empire. I have been waiting for you to wake up." Jake tried to sit up, but his body still felt weak. "Queen?" he repeated, feeling confused. "I just thought you were hurt and needed help." "I did not know you were royalty." Queen Lyra Lay smiled, and her violet eyes seemed to sparkle. "You saved the life of the most important person in our empire without knowing who I was. That makes your actions even more meaningful to my people." Jake looked around the luxurious room again. "Where am I exactly?" "You are aboard the royal flagship of the Zalathian fleet," Queen Lyra said. "My people have been searching for me since my diplomatic ship crashed. When I activated my emergency beacon, they came immediately. You have been unconscious for 3 weeks while our medical technology healed your body." Jake felt his arms and legs and realized she was right. All the damage from his walk through the desert was completely gone. He felt stronger and healthier than he had in years. "Thank you for helping me. I guess we saved each other." Queen Lyra Lay's expression became more serious. "Jake, there is something very important I must tell you. What you did in the desert was not just a rescue mission. According to the ancient laws of my people, you performed the ritual of Thelnara. I do not know what that means, Jake said, feeling worried by her serious tone. Thelnara is the proving of worth, Queen Lyrelay explained. It is how a male demonstrates that he is worthy to be the life partner of a Zalothian female. You carried me through mortal danger for 5 days. You shared your water and warmth with me when keeping them for yourself would have improved your own chances of survival. You used your body to protect me from harm even when it caused you pain. Jake stared at her in growing alarm. I was just trying to keep you alive. I was not trying to prove anything. Queen Lyrelay nodded. I understand that you did not know about our customs, but intention does not matter in this case. The ritual was completed by your actions. According to our laws, you have claimed me as your mate, and I am bound to accept your claim. Wait, Jake said, sitting up straight despite his weakness. You are saying that because I helped you, we have to get married. That is exactly what I am saying, Queen Lyrelay replied. And I want you to know that I accept your claim willingly. What you did in the desert showed me the kind of male you are. You are brave, kind, and selfless. These are the qualities I have been looking for in a partner my entire life. Jake felt like the room was spinning around him. But I do not want to get married. I mean, no offense to you personally, but I barely know you. And you are a queen of an entire empire. I am just a cargo pilot. Queen Lyrelay's expression became sad. I understand your shock, Jake, but you must understand my position as well. If I refuse to honor the Thelnara, I will be exiled from my own people. I will lose my crown, and my empire will fall into chaos without a ruler. Before Jake could respond, the door to his room opened and several tall aliens in military uniforms entered. Queen Lyrelay stood and spoke to them in her own language for several minutes. Jake could tell from their body language that they were discussing something very serious. Jake, Queen Lyrelay said, turning back to him, these are my advisors. They have come to tell us that word of our engagement has already spread throughout the galaxy. Diplomatic representatives from dozens of worlds are requesting permission to attend our wedding ceremony. One of the advisors stepped forward and spoke, in accented English. Mr. Morrison, you may not realize the significance of what has happened. No male from any species has ever successfully completed the Thelnara with a member of our royal family. Your achievement has made you famous across the known galaxy, Jake. Felt a headache coming on. I just wanted to help someone who was hurt. How did that turn into a galactic news story? Because, Queen Lyrelay said gently, what you did was considered impossible. The burning flats of Keth 7 have killed every rescue team that has ever entered them. Military experts from every major civilization have studied the journey you made, and they all agree that no rational being would attempt such a mission. Another advisor spoke up. The fact that you not only survived, but successfully rescued our queen has caused quite a stir in diplomatic circles. Many species are now very interested in forming alliances with humanity. Jake was beginning to understand that this was much bigger than just him and Queen Lyrelay. What happens if I say no to the marriage? The advisors looked uncomfortable, and Queen Lyrelay answered him. If you refuse to complete the bonding ceremony, it will be seen as a grave insult to our entire species. The Zalothian Empire will have no choice but to consider humanity an enemy rather than a potential ally. And if I say yes, Jake asked, then you will become king consort of the Zalothian Empire, Queen Lyrelay said. You will help me rule over 3 star systems and billions of people. You will have access to technology that could advance human civilization by hundreds of years. Jake put his head in his hands. This is insane. 3 weeks ago, I was delivering supplies to mining stations. Now you are telling me I have to choose between starting an interstellar war and becoming an alien king. Queen Lyra Lay sat down on the edge of his bed and placed her hand gently on his arm. Jake, I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to know that this is not just about politics or ancient laws. During those 5 days in the desert, I saw who you really are. You are the kind of person who does the right thing even when it is hard. You are exactly the kind of partner I have been hoping to find. Jake looked into her violet eyes and saw something there that made him pause. It was not just gratitude or duty. There was genuine affection and respect. Queen Lyra Lay was not just following her people's laws. She actually wanted to marry him. What kind of life would we have? Jake asked quietly. I know nothing about being a king or ruling an empire. You would learn, Queen Lyra Lay said with a smile, and you would not be alone. I have been preparing to rule my entire life, and I would help you understand everything you need to know. We would be partners in every sense of the word. One of the advisors cleared his throat. Your Majesty, we should inform Mr. Morrison that representatives from Earth's government are requesting a meeting. They are very eager to discuss the implications of this union. Jake sighed deeply. He was beginning to realize that this choice would affect not just his own future, but the future of his entire species. The weight of that responsibility felt heavier than carrying Queen Lyra Lay through the desert had been. How long do I have to decide? Jake asked. The wedding ceremony must take place within 1 month according to our traditions, Queen Lyra Lay said. But Jake, I want you to know that whatever you decide, I will respect your choice. I will not force you to marry me even if it means losing my crown. Jake looked at this remarkable woman who was willing to give up everything she had worked for just to respect his freedom of choice. He was beginning to understand why she was considered worthy of ruling an empire. And despite everything, he found himself wondering what it would be like to spend his life getting to know her better. The next few days brought a parade of visitors that made Jake's head spin. Representatives from Earth's government arrived first, led by a stern woman named Director Collins, who seemed to think Jake's personal feelings were less important than. Humanity's future, Mr. Morrison, Director Collins said as she sat across from him in the luxurious meeting room. I hope you understand the opportunity that has been presented to us. The Zalathian Empire controls technology that could solve humanity's energy crisis and advance our space exploration by centuries. Jake rubbed his temples where a headache was forming. Director, with respect, I did not ask for this opportunity. I was just trying to save someone's life. That is exactly why this is so perfect, Director Collins continued. You have already proven yourself to them in the most dramatic way possible. All you have to do now is marry their queen, and humanity will have access to the most powerful alliance in the galaxy. All I have to do, Jake repeated, feeling angry, now. You are talking about the rest of my life, like it is some kind of business transaction. Before Director Collins could respond, Queen Lyra Lay entered the room with several of her own advisors. Jake noticed that she had been avoiding him for the past 2 days, and he wondered if she was having second thoughts about the marriage. Director Collins, Queen Lyra Lay said politely, I hope you are finding our hospitality acceptable. Very much so, Your Majesty, Director Collins replied. I was just explaining to Mr. Morrison how beneficial this union would be for both our species. Queen Lyrale's violet eyes flashed with something that might have been anger. Director, I hope you are not pressuring Jake to make a decision based on political considerations. This marriage must be his free choice or it will not be valid according to our laws. Of course, Your Majesty, Director Collins said quickly. I was simply making sure he understood all the implications. After the Earth delegation left, Jake found himself alone with Queen Lyrale for the first time in days. She seemed nervous and kept looking out the large windows at the stars. You have been avoiding me, Jake said gently. Queen Lyrale sighed and turned to face him. I have been thinking about our situation, and I realized something that troubles me deeply. Everyone around us has reasons why we should marry that have nothing to do with our own feelings. My advisors want to secure our alliance with humanity. Your government wants access to our technology. But what do you want, Jake? Jake was surprised by the question. In all the chaos of the past few days, no one had asked him what he actually wanted. I honestly do not know anymore. 3 weeks ago, my biggest worry was whether I had enough fuel to make it to my next delivery. Now everyone is telling me I have to decide the future of 2 civilizations. Queen Lyrale walked over and sat down beside him. Then let me tell you what I have learned about you during our time together. In the desert, when you thought no one was watching, I saw who you really are. You are kind without expecting anything in return. You are brave without trying to impress anyone. You kept going when any reasonable person would have given up. Anyone would have done the same thing, Jake said. No, Jake, they would not have, Queen Lyrale said firmly. I have lived for 35 years and met thousands of people from dozens of different worlds. Most of them would have walked away from that distress signal. Most of them would have left me to die rather than risk their own lives for a stranger. Jake looked at her beautiful face and saw the sincerity in her violet eyes. What do you want, Lyrale? She smiled at hearing her name without the royal title. I want to get to know the man who carried me 90 miles through hell without asking for anything in return. I want to learn about human customs and share my own culture with you. I want to build something together that is bigger than either of us could create alone. And if it does not work out, Jake asked, if we try being married and discover we are not compatible, then we will face that problem when it comes, Queen, Lyrale said. But Jake, I have a feeling about you. During those 5 days in the desert, even when you were delirious from dehydration, you never stopped taking care of me. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Over the following days, Jake spent more time with Queen Lyrale and began to see past her royal bearing to the intelligent, compassionate woman underneath. She told him stories about her childhood on the Zalathian homeworld, where she had been trained from birth to rule but had always felt lonely in her position of power. I have always known that I would marry for political reasons, she explained, as they walked through the ship's beautiful gardens. I accepted that I would probably never have a marriage based on love and mutual respect. But then you appeared in my life and showed me that such a thing might be possible. Jake learned that Queen Lyrale was not just a figurehead ruler, but an active leader who had spent years working to improve life for her people. She had established schools and hospitals throughout the empire and was known for her fair treatment of different alien species within Zalathian space. You would not just be marrying me, she explained. You would be joining me in the work of ruling. I could use a partner who understands what it means to sacrifice for others. As the wedding date approached, Jake realized that his feelings for Queen Lyrale were growing stronger each day. She was brilliant and funny and kind, and she seemed to genuinely care about his happiness. But he was still terrified by the enormity of what he was being asked to do. The pressure increased when other alien delegations began arriving for the wedding ceremony. Jake met ambassadors from the Crystalline Confederacy, the Metal Brotherhood, and dozens of other civilizations he had never heard of. All of them were intensely curious about the human who had accomplished the impossible. Your species has impressed many of us, said Ambassador Krex of the Silicon Republic during one formal dinner. We had dismissed humans as too primitive for serious consideration, but your actions have made us reconsider that assessment. Jake found these conversations exhausting. Everyone wanted to know about human culture and capabilities, as if his one act of heroism represented all of humanity. He felt like he was carrying the weight of his entire species' reputation. The night before the wedding ceremony, Jake could not sleep. He stood by the windows of his room looking out at the stars and thinking about the choice he had to make in the morning. Queen Lyrelai had made it clear that she would respect whatever decision he made, even if it meant losing her crown. Jake thought about his simple life as a cargo pilot and how peaceful it had been. No responsibilities except getting his deliveries made on time. No one depending on him for anything more important than spare parts and food supplies. But then he thought about Queen Lyrelai's smile when she talked about the schools she had built for children throughout the Empire. He thought about how she had held him during those cold nights in the desert when she was injured and could have focused only on her own pain. Jake realized that he had a choice to make that went beyond politics and ancient laws. He could choose safety and simplicity, or he could choose to build something meaningful with a woman who had already shown him more courage and compassion than anyone he had ever known. As the first light of dawn appeared outside his window, Jake Morrison made his decision. Jake found Queen Lyrelai in her private chambers just as the sun was rising over the Zalathian flagship. She was standing by the window wearing a simple white robe, her long silver hair flowing down her back. She looked beautiful, but also sad, as if she had already accepted that he was going to refuse the marriage. Lyrelai, Jake said softly, and she turned to face him with those remarkable violet eyes. You have made your decision, she said, and it was not a question. She could read his expression and was preparing herself for disappointment. I have, Jake said, walking closer to her. I will marry you, but only if you accept my conditions. Queen Lyrelai's eyes widened with surprise and hope. What conditions? Jake took her hands in his and looked directly into her eyes. First, this marriage has to be a real partnership. I'm not going to be some trophy husband who sits around looking pretty while you do all the work. If I am going to be king consort, then I want to actually help you rule. Queen Lyrelai smiled for the first time in days. I would not want it any other way. What else? Second, I want to stay connected to my human heritage. I will learn your customs and respect your traditions, but I do not want to lose who I am, and I want to make sure that this alliance between our peoples is built on mutual respect, not just political convenience. That is exactly what I hoped you would say, Queen Lyrelai said, squeezing his hands. Are there more conditions? Jake grinned. Just one more. I want you to teach me how to say I love you in your language, because I think I am going to want to use those words a lot in the future. Queen Lyrelai laughed, and tears began running down her cheeks. In Zalathian, we say Kella nor they malin. But Jake, those words mean more than just I love you. They mean you are the other half of my soul. Kella nor they malin Lyrelai, Jake said carefully, trying to get the pronunciation right. Kella nor. They malin, Jake Morrison, she replied, and then she kissed him. The wedding ceremony took place 6 hours later in the main hangar of the flagship, which had been transformed into the most beautiful space Jake had ever seen. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy attended. Either in person or through holographic projection, Jake wore a combination of human and Zalathian formal wear, a black tuxedo from Earth with a silver ceremonial cloak from Liralay's homeworld. Queen Liralay was radiant in traditional white and silver robes that seemed to capture and reflect every light in the room. The ceremony itself was conducted in both languages, with Jake and Liralay each speaking vows that had been carefully crafted to honor both of their cultures. When Jake promised to carry Liralay through whatever hardships they might face together, every being in the hangar understood the deeper meaning of those words. "You carried me through the wasteland when you could have saved yourself," Queen Liralay said during her vows. "You shared your life with a stranger when keeping it for yourself would have been safer. In you, I have found not just a worthy partner, but proof that love can bridge any distance, even the vastness between worlds." Jake's vows were simpler, but no less heartfelt. "I did not save you in that desert to claim you as a prize. I did it because leaving you there would have been wrong. If that makes me worthy of your love, then I promise to spend every day